Today we're going to show you how to clone an article of clothing. This is one of the shirts I'm going to do for this month's Sew Along. It's kind of at its end of its life. I've already fixed it up a few times, but it's really fallen apart. Some people go through and rip out all the seams. I don't bother. I just cut right on the seams because this garment's no longer a wearable garment. I might do a video about how to do it by pinning. That's where instead of cutting up the garment, you position it as flat as possible and pin all the corners and connect the dots. I just find it's easier just to cut the garment up. And I cut directly on the seams because I'll transfer the fabric pieces to paper and then add seam allowances later. Now this is a worn garment, so when I transfer it to paper, I'll try and clean up some of the straight edges, any of the warping, and the stretching out that happens to a garment over time. I started sewing when I was about 6 years old or so. I didn't even buy a retail pattern until I was in my early 20s. I just cloned all the clothes I had that I wanted. And even I still haven't bought very many retail patterns over the years. It wasn't until we got to the So Long website or Facebook group that I actually purchased any amount of retail patterns. I'm going to cut the side seams now. And if you want a practice shirt to cut up on, go to the Goodwill and find a shirt that fits really well. It's a good way in case you don't want to chop up one of the shirts you already own. Depending on our Goodwill here, it depends on what day of the week you go. Some days shirts are on sale, some days pants are on sale. Our Goodwill never has fabric or never has a sewing machine in the place. But has about 5,000 shirts. Pretty sure they all have a lot of shirts. Now this one, this is the front of the shirt. I'm going to put a clip on the front part of the shirt. So when I put it on paper, I'll know which is the front. The front usually has a little bit more of a curve than the back, depending on where they put the yoke, the shoulder seam, front panel. This would be the front panel, left side. Here's the yoke. I think in my pattern stash of patterns that I've made from the shirts I've cloned, I probably have 20 shirt patterns. Mostly different styles of button-ups. There's the yoke. And this would be the right shirt panel. And depending on how the plackets are done, the right side and left side aren't always identically shaped. Sometimes the one with the buttons on the buttonholes is a little larger, depending on the construction technique. There's the left shirt panel. This is the back. Don't need to do anything with the other sleeve. It's identical to the other one. And this has a pleat in the back, and they tack sewed it. So this is one seam you're going to need to rip out. Yeah, not a very good video when you're watching somebody rip out a seam. But didn't know they tacked this one. There we go. That's the back panel. Now I'm going to show you how I transfer it over to paper. I use kraft paper. This is packing from an Amazon package we got. This is where you really want to take your time to try and lay it out as flat as possible. And if you need to, if you've got a cutting mat, you can pin the corners down a little. Now this is the back edge of the bottom edge of the yoke. It has to be a straight line. Well, it doesn't have to, but in this shirt it was. Trying to get it as straight as possible, but not stretch the fabric. It's pretty good. Then I Sharpie each corner with a dot. This will be a straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, curved. Since that's curved, I'm going to draw that curve in. There we go. And leave that there for reference. Not much to reference on a yoke. Now I'm going to get out my ruler and I'm going to pencil these in. I pencil in first because I don't want to get marker on my ruler. These are going to be the seam lines. So I'm going to use a Sharpie and put them in pretty dark. If you don't have a very steady hand, you can still use a ruler with a marker. Just remember, you're probably going to get marker on your ruler. Now to add the seam allowances. I have a special tool for that, available almost everywhere. You can make it yourself. Just strap a couple of pens and pencils together. Just happens to be that these two strapped together is exactly 5/8 of an inch, which is kind of convenient for pattern making. I apologize for that. This one is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Works the same as the 5/8, it's just a little smaller. Obviously, on a symmetric piece like this, you could do half and then fold it over when you cut it. But for starting off, it might be easier just to do the whole piece. Except the back panel, it's fairly easy to do in one piece. I mean, fold over. Now, since we're drafting this ourselves, there's no information on here. So now's the time you put in here. Since it's not a standard 5/8 inch, 3/8 seam allowance. Cut 2, it's a yoke. This would be the neck. Bottom yoke. It's probably about all the information you need on there. Then for cutting paper, I have a rotary cutter that's just for paper. You could get out your ruler to cut this out. I just eyeball it. And then each pattern piece you cut out, you want to make sure you label what your seam allowance you did for that. So when you sew it, you're sewing the garment to the right size. You could use any seam allowance you like. 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8, 5/8. There are a few specialty areas where you need a different size of seam allowance. Like if you're making a jacket, sometimes you want 1 inch. If it's a structured jacket. Necklines and collars, you typically want to trim them down to 1/4 so you have less fabric to try and manipulate around. That's how you make a pattern piece out of your cut. Then you just continue to do this on all your pieces. And then you'll be ready to start assembling your garment.